Welcome to the Heaven on Earth podcast, a world where you study the story you were born into and redesign it into the story you choose. A world where you can have heaven on earth right here, right now, no matter the past. For me, heaven on earth is a holistic experience, leading with the heart, engaging with mind, body, and spirit. It's mindful, fostering calm and secure attachments. As we rise into consciousness, it's an earthly journey where we sensually embrace dynamic living.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Heaven on Earth, where we peel back the layers of trauma, culture, and conditioning to reclaim your original essence, not just for personal healing, but for planetary repair. Hi, I'm your host, Claudia Cauterucci, psychotherapist, empath leader, and translator of what I call your human technology. Before we start, let me always say this super clearly. This podcast is not religious, but it is deeply spiritual. We approach every subject from a multidimensional lens, spanning science, psychology, energy, history, trauma, and the sacred mystery. Here we believe in both and. Super important. The clinical and the cosmic, the rational and the radical. We explore it all holistically, compassionately, and courageously. So today's episode is a vital one. It's one of those truths that once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear. This episode actually piggybacks on our last exploration of gossip and how we contort ourselves to survive the group. Gossip was a survival tool. Is a survival tool, a projection of fear to stay inside the circle. Mimic, today's focus, is its quieter twin. It's what we actually do when we silence truth. We shrink our power and we all walk in step to avoid being cast out. And the way I hold it is that both gossip and mimic are trauma responses, and both of them cost us connection. Human connection. Mimic doesn't just distort relationships, it erodes the self with a capital S, a concept that I first awoke to through the work of New Earth visionary and co-author of the second edition of the Empath Leader book, Amanda Flaker. She actually put the language to something I'd always felt. It was a deep wound that I didn't even know was there. And maybe that might be the truth for you today when you hear this. I'd felt it and I'd witnessed it all throughout my life, mostly because I was always outside of mimic. So I felt super weird often, even though I know how to do mimic. I know how to do mimic really well. Mimic is everywhere. And it's costing us so much. So let's dive right in, because I hope right about now you're intrigued and engaged. So the way that I hold this or frame it is that mimic is a survival strategy. Let's begin clinically. Mimic, or assimilation, what you might know as assimilation, is not weakness. It is actually a sophisticated survival mechanism. Psychologically, it's what we call social adaptive mirroring. It's a subconscious attempt to reduce threat, believe it or not, and increase belonging. We have to, in order to survive as little babies. That's why we have these mirror neurons, right? That's why when you open your mouth, when you talk to a baby, the baby will open their mouth. When you say, I love you, they will in gibberish try to say, I love you back. Little babies, toddlers imitate, and this is mimic, a survival strategy. But what happens is something that is used for protection and belonging can become pathology. When you chronically override your authentic self that you might not even know because you've been imitating and mimicking, you don't even know that you're doing it to survive. So, in order to avoid rejection, ridicule, or even harm, you set off a slow burn internal implosion. And in my podcast, The Air of Emotions, I talk about implosions. In my practice, I see it every day. And my practice is the inspiration for this podcast and for the podcast on gossip. So it's depression that doesn't stem from brain chemistry. It actually stems from soul suppression. It's anxiety that's not irrational. It's the body screaming, "This life is not mine." It's a call out. Remember, listen to depression as a call out, as your internal voice screaming, trying to get your attention. That's how I work with depression. What is it asking for? It's dissociation from years of trying to walk someone else's walk. It's identity diffusion. You don't know who you are, even though your authentic self does show up, does these cameo appearances throughout your life. Sometimes in the shadow, sure, but sometimes openly, with full chakra light ups, what I call the me of me. We can feel it. We walk into spaces, we do certain things, we see something, and we say, "Oh, this is me," with mimic that gets diffused. This is the heartbreaking part. It's internalized self-hatred that we don't even know is there. Sometimes, and I get this a lot, are diagnoses, people who come into my practice with diagnoses that completely miss the fact that the person is not sick, that there is no disorder. They're just not allowed to be themselves. I'll give you an example. I had a client who came in who said that all her life she'd been diagnosed as borderline and bipolar since she was a teenager. And as our sessions progressed, I realized first she had grown up in a very strict religious community that was pretty much cult-like. The mimic was the name of the game. Uniformity was the name of the game. And so when she was expressing emotions about really very normal things, like a friend of hers committing suicide in high school, and she was depressed and crying and not eating, and no one would talk about it, she was diagnosed and actually institutionalized for a few weeks as bipolar. Interesting, isn't it? And heartbreaking. But we mimic because it feels safer than being cast out. That's scary, because where would we belong? But over time, mimic fractures identity, completely censors intuition, and it erodes vitality. Netflix documentaries are full of this in terms of cults and very strict religious orders and what happens to the person who decides to leave. It's tragic, although thank God more than ever are there support groups for folks who try to leave. And guess what? Now we're talking about it. Mimic leads to burnout. It leads to numbness, self-abandonment, and what I call energetic homelessness. We don't know ourselves. All of my topics, wealth from within, the empath leader, dynamic meditation, this is my jam. This is my life's work, is to talk about these things from a different angle. So let's talk about now the high cost of this walking in step, wearing the same uniform all the time, because that's what mimic is. Mimic is walking in step, and we've seen where that can lead. It's extreme. We think of Nazi Germany, uniforms, groupthink, salutes, culture so rigid in its mimic that it actually annihilated anything or anyone that was different. And remember, rigidity is the exact opposite of mental health. It's also a measure. But mimic also exists on the other end of the spectrum. The pressure to be so different, so iconoclastic, that your identity actually just becomes another performance. Mimic doesn't always look like conformity. Sometimes it's the compulsive rebellion against it, but it's still reactionary, not authentic. It's not your authentic self. In both cases, the self gets lost. In both cases, we're not free. Okay, so here's a side note to empaths, my tribe, my people. And I do want to shout out that the Empath Leader book is coming out this summer in June, the second edition, and it is pure fire. Please spread the news because it's going to be powerful, and it's going to be powerful for these times, for this exact moment in time. Anyway, all right, empaths. Even if you don't identify as an empath, this will be really interesting for you. If you're an empath, you've very likely felt this. You've always been too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too intuitive. That's where you felt really weird, too aware of the things that don't make sense to others. You might have even been aware of mimic. You just didn't know how to speak to it. Like, why is everyone assimilating? Why is everyone trying to be like everyone else? And the way that might have shown up is how I describe myself. Like, I'm a little bit weird. I'm a little bit of an outlier. And sometimes really liking it. And so from an early age, you began to mimic, maybe unconsciously, to survive, to belong. So this might look like you dulling your shine to make others comfortable. I know I did that. You silenced all the things that you knew, all your gifts, in order to not be ridiculed. You shapeshifted, right? Empaths shapeshift, they morph to keep the peace, because we're hardwired to harmonize environments. You become agreeable, invisible, nice. And remember, maybe I'll do a podcast on this. Nice or being really good is a trap. In fact, being nice, the nice boy, the nice girl, or the good boy, or the good girl is actually a really intense way of mimicking. What got silenced was your prowess. I talk about this in the book. Prowess, your power, your perceptive genius, your leadership. This is exactly why I created the Empath Leader, to open our eyes to the gifts, the skills, the natural abilities of the empath, but also the skills they develop in order to survive the systems they grew up in. Mimic has really muzzled the empath's medicine for way too long. And of course, you know that's about to change. So let's jump into the Mimic program. Amanda Flaker talks about the Mimic program as a program of destruction. And this is a warning. It's a feedback loop of superiority masked as sameness. It's actually like a collective hypnosis that says if you're different, you're dangerous. Think of it. It is like a collective hypnosis. It feeds only scarcity and fear. It's part of what she would describe as the lack matrix. Think of it. Everywhere we go, if you don't adhere to the sameness rules, you're the threat. So it's not sameness really, it's enforced sameness. So let's rephrase that. It's not sameness, it's enforced sameness. That is the actual danger. It's not community. Let's not be fooled. It's conformity, but at the cost of our souls. And let me tell you, this program runs deep. It's eternal, because in this podcast, this is what I talk about, the eternal way that humanity has been forever. The dark ages of humanity, but the veil is lifting, and this is why we're talking about it. So from the school desks to the Sunday pulpits, from Instagram, TikTok, social media, to your roles in your families, in your religions. It's the operating system, but it leads to collapse, my loves, because when everyone is walking in step, no one is dancing. No one is speaking their truth. That's a scary place. Now, hold on for a few seconds, okay? Because in the book, The Diversity in Humanity, I wrote a chapter for that and I talk about this. So I want to really emphasize this part. Let's hold the nuance and let's hold the paradox of sameness. Sameness can be sacred because sameness can give us belonging. As a humanity, root chakra, groundedness, stability, safety, security, protection. It can give us rituals, beautiful rituals. And don't get me started on rituals. It gives us predictability, and we need that. Babies need that. Toddlers need that. Relationships need it to feel securely attached. Gives us safety, right? And safety is gold. Sameness gives us the beautiful nod from a stranger that says, I see you. Have you ever been in another country and you see people that are from your country or speak your language? And you greet each other? Well, that's sameness. Or when your child is crying and another mother comes over? Well, that's sameness. It's that nod. It's that nod of like, I see you. I know you. I know parts of you without knowing you. Now, I happen to believe that's true for humanity. I know you as another human. So here's the key. Secure sameness should serve as a launching pad, not a leash. Sameness should replicate the secure attachment container that allows for exploration, evolution, and expansion. Remember, when a child is securely attached, when the child knows that mommy and daddy are back there watching them, this child will explore, will run, will play, will touch, will say words because it feels safe. The child that does not feel safe will cling, will hide, will be afraid. So secure attachment through the container of sameness, right? This reversal, this grounding mechanism allows for differentiation, exploration, risk-taking, individuality. Believe it or not. What happens is we've lost the balance. Sameness translates now into safety, but only if we stay small and follow the rules. We've got to stay uniform. If you look at my cloudism, the border, I talk about the old neighborhood, right? Our families, they don't want us to change. They want us to keep the same role. We understand it. It's scary when people grow, evolve, expand. I get it. It's scary when our children become people that we don't even know or have characteristics because we do know them. But that is evolution, and that goes from the individual all the way to the collective. We must expand, and we must expand into newness because those are the iterations of evolution, of growth. So let's talk a little bit here about the outliers in case you are one. Okay. Likely, I think possibly people who watch my podcast have been the outliers, the breakers of mimic. So history is shaped not by those who walked in step, but by those who moonwalked out. Go check out my cloudism on moonwalking out. Let's name a few. Jesus, Harriet, as in Tubman, Teresa Davila, Carl Jung, Rosa Parks, Malcolm, Martin, Mr. Rogers, the Wright brothers, they didn't just resist mimic, they rewrote the entire script. So many examples. Diversity disrupts mimic, my loves, and disruption, when it's led by the heart, it usually is, because it comes from inspiration, which means inspired by the spirit. In spirit births evolution. We need the folks who got out of the pond, who left the neighborhood, who explored, who crossed the oceans. We need them. And this is for you. Your originality is not indulgent. Your uniqueness is your treasure. I just did a cloudism on your favorite self, because that's how you're going to find your uniqueness. Is what are the parts of you that are your favorite self? Your individuality, your uniqueness, your originality is medicine. So how do we heal mimic, right? Always, I want to offer some healing here. Healing steps. Remember, we have to have a caveat here. When you're the outlier, when you are different, there is a panic, of fear, of ridicule, of harm. So we want to honor that and respect folks who've had to assimilate in order to survive. If this were a visual, I would put it in bold and underlined. That includes people LGBTQ+, that includes African Americans, that includes women in corporate America, that includes women with other women. I mean, this is eternal. It's hard to be the outlier. It's hard to be different in environments that are going to crush us if we are. But I am inviting you to notice that now is the time to heal this, to talk about it, because assimilation also kills us. All right. How do we heal? Clinically, we acknowledge that mimic can cause trauma, pretty severe trauma, and everything else that comes from trauma. Anxiety disorders, depression, what can be diagnosed or misdiagnosed as borderline or bipolar. But yeah, we feel pretty wacky, and I see it all the time. Can also lead to suicide, just like gossip, because groupthink is so strong. Emotionally, we can grieve the years lost. That's an identity piece too. We can ask the questions like, why wasn't I my true self earlier? Well, we know the price we have to pay if we're different. But it doesn't mean we don't need the space and the safe places to cry that out, to regret, to have remorse for time lost. But it's never too late to start today. One of my favorite things about 12-step programs is that you can get up and you can dust off and you start it over. So it's never too late. Cognitively, how do we heal? We rewire our neural nets. Remember, the more we fire, the more we wire. The more neurons fire, the more neurons wire. And so we can start training our cognitions, our thoughts, our mind, that difference is not a threat, that being your authentic self is not dangerous. And it will lead you to this podcast, to other podcasts, and to groups who will accept and welcome, because we do need places, therapy, meditation groups, other groups. Love these. This is a different way of being in groups that accept who we are. And sometimes that won't be your family, by the way. Spiritually, we reclaim our divine blueprint. We're meant to be our original self. We're meant to do that work for the divine. We are meant to be here so that the quantum field can offer us a billion options of who to be, of how to move humanity forward. That's our purpose. How am I my most authentic, favorite, delicious self? So that is expressed on this planet. And aren't we thrilled that the people who did that, who did the difference, who did the stuff that was outside of the bell curve, brought us into discussions, brought a new wave of innovation? Yes, I get it. I get that there's shadow to all of that. Of course, there's always shadow. But we talk about it on podcasts like this. We talk about it, we heal it, and we transform it. So heaven on earth begins when mimic ends. And what do I mean by that? When we stop hating ourselves, when we stop hating our uniqueness, when we stop denying our sameness as a humanity, our glorious contradictions. We are a paradox. The more we understand that, the more harmony we have at our fingertips. We basically stop destroying ourselves because we've seen what walking in step can do. It destroys, and it destroys humanity. So I'm repetitive. My podcast always talks about this. Let's stop projecting our pain outward. Let's stop perpetuating systems, right? Systems, groups, families, cults, religions, governments that cause harm by insisting on being the rigid, complete same, enforced sameness. Let's start remembering. You know how I talk about our a priori selves, our a priori humanity coming back home here. Let's remember ourselves through exercises and practices that bring out the favorite parts of us. We start returning. You're not here to mimic. How about being the prototype? Embody your sacred difference. Ripple it out. Feel securely attached to the sameness in our humanity. Pick and choose the parts of you that you want from your family, that you want to continue with the sameness, but not at the cost of your uniqueness, my loves. Not at that high price. So let's all breathe. This hits home for me. I've had to do a lot of work to get to this podcast. So here's some questions. Ask yourself, where am I still mimicking? Where am I shrinking, contracting, playing small? Where am I walking in step to stay safe? Just ask. No decisions, no conclusions, no actions, just reflection. Remember, we're getting a PhD on you. And then with beautiful tenderness, especially for that inner child, then you begin the sacred rebellion, the re-evolution. So if this hit home, subscribe, share, write a comment. Let's be in discussion around this. Let's talk around the table. My goal is to hit 144,000 subscribers. I'm snailing away on that because we know that's the tipping point. So let's get this news out. And remember, you are not too much. You are not alone. You are not here to walk in step. You are here to lead yourself and others home. Until next time, take exquisite care of your nervous system and keep choosing you. I'll see you in the next Heaven on Earth podcast.